Hello, I'm Emma B. Perez, life design and career coach for teens and young adults. This Empower Your Teen YouTube channel is all about supporting parents. To learn how your high school or college age child can go from undecided to excited, click the link in the description box. To get even more support as a parent, just stick around by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. Okay, let's get to today's topic. Okay, everyone, I am joined today by Tova Gar. I've asked her to be here with us because she helps families through the adolescent years, particularly in the digital age. And she does this through mentoring, workshops, and lectures around the world, quite literally, from the US to Israel, South Africa, Australia, and back around again. And today she's joining us from Israel. So welcome, welcome, Tova.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
I'm so excited you're here. So I want to get into the nitty gritty, but first, I want to ask you about your story. Can you tell us what led you to working with teens and their parents?
Sure. So the truth is that working with teens is something that I've kind of always done. I grew up in a family of educators. My parents were educators during the year, professors at universities, and during the summers we used to go to camp in the States. And so I was always surrounded by teens and education. It's just what we always did in our family. And I grew up in the Scouts here in Israel, which is very different than the Scouts in America. It's co-ed and it's different in many ways. So by the age of 16, I was already working with sixth graders, and I kind of fell in love with the work that I was doing, and it led me through my life. I kept doing it in the Army. I did it, it's what I studied for, and was always involved in teen and young adult education. And as I grew up and things changed, I found myself doing more senior positions, less in touch with the field or with actual teens. And then when I moved to New York, what I ended up doing was working with youth educators, and I was spending a lot of time in the field talking to teens, talking to educators who were working with teens, trying to figure out how we can transform the world of teen education today, right? Because the reality is that in a lot of institutions, we're teaching our kids in the same way that we taught them 50, 60, 100 years ago. We haven't really changed in our perspective, and it's a huge problem because teens today are different. And after that position is when I actually ended up opening my own coaching business because I wanted to do things my way. I didn't want to stop doing things the way my funders wanted me to do them, which anybody who works in a nonprofit knows that that's kind of the world. And I had first honestly started doing mother-daughter things that had to do with my own journey and the own process that I was going through. And this understanding, I know teens, I get teens, I understand them, I've worked with them for so long. And the time in life that is most important in our development, or one of the most important ones, is our teen years, right? That's when we kind of form and decide who we are, where do we fit in, how do we figure out this world? We have to rebel against our parents to figure out ourselves. And in the time when we most need our parents is when we most push them away, and when parents don't know how to talk to their kids, right? They try, most of them have the best of intentions, and it often just doesn't work. And I knew that I could help them bridge that gap. I knew that I could do it, and so I started with that, and I started with mothers and daughters. And as I developed the work, and I was talking to more and more mothers. First of all, I found out that I was talking to sons and fathers as well, because that's just the nature. And then about, I would say 4 years ago, something like that, maybe it's already 5 years ago, I started realizing that a huge percent of the calls that I was getting, in one way or another, the challenges they were having had to do with the internet, phones, social media, whether they were aware of it or not, right? Whether it was a very direct connection because it was a mother calling saying, I found my daughter's iPod, right? Not even a phone, but an iPod with sexting on it, and the girl was 12 and she didn't know what to do, right? This was shocking information to her. First of all, she didn't know you could even text on an iPod, but let alone, right, this kind of texting. And so that was very clear, right, that this had to do with social media. But then to other challenges where there was a lack of communication, or there was a tremendous amount of fighting. And when we kind of boiled it down to what was this about? Well, my son won't get off video games, right? I can't get him to stop. right? He won't go to sleep at night, or I can't get him to come participate in family activities, right? Or my daughter is on her phone 24/7, and I catch her at 3 o'clock in the morning on her phone and I can't get her off, right? Or you're trying to, things that don't necessarily look exactly like social media, but turn out, or like my daughter is really upset, right? She's really upset. She's having a hard time at school. She won't talk to me. I don't know what's going on. And then we find out that there are all kinds of, social dynamics going on online and offline that are affecting what's going on. And so that's how I kind of migrated into directing the work that I do with teens and parents, which is again something I've been doing for over 25 years, specifically into how do we raise teens in this world, right? Teens and kids in this world where it's rapidly changing. It's not, changes in our history have gone much, much slower. And, I got my first smartphone in 2010, right? That machine that I had is not what I'm holding today. Even what I had last year is not what I'm capable of doing today. And their world is changing dramatically all the time, and it's affecting them in a way that it's not affecting us. And if we can't catch up with that and be able to guide them, then we're all in trouble. I'm sorry, that might have been a little bit longer than you wanted.
But no, thank you so much. No, I love hearing people's stories. So thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about that for a second. When it comes to understanding our teens, right? We can't really draw on our own memories because their experience is so different than ours when we were teens. So how do we try to understand them?
Well, I love that you're bringing that up, because I think that is one of the biggest challenges that parents have, especially when you look at your child and you feel that what they're experiencing is very similar to what you did, right? They're usually, I see two different things. One is that when a parent sees their child and their child is having trouble socially, or something, or they're madly in love with, with a boy or something, and they can't get anything done, and we see ourselves in them, and so then we assume that what they are going through is what we went through, and we totally understand and we totally get it because we were there, right? And that is not true. Even if what you are seeing feels very familiar and very similar, it cannot be the same thing, because it's not the same. She's not the same person, or he's not the same person. They're not living in the same day and age. Life is different. So many things are different. So there may be components, but what that does is it triggers ourselves, and we start functioning from that 14-year-old girl that we were, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that 15. We stop functioning as the parent, as the adult, and we start functioning as that kid. And that's one of the ways where we get stuck. That's one option. The other option is that their experience is so far removed from our lives as teens and with the things that we experience, especially when it comes to phones, right? So how many parents have I talked to who are like, I don't understand what they do on that phone all day. Why do they have to have it? What is the big deal to put down the phone, come have dinner with their family, and walk away, right? We just don't get it, because it's just not part of our experience. And so because we totally don't get it, often we will dismiss things that are deeply important to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or when it comes to social media, they are things that they are actually addicted to, not by their fault, but because that is the way the technology is created. And there's a real struggle there. So when we're not functioning as the grounded, responsible, thoughtful adults that we are in conflict, then we can't communicate, right? If we lower ourselves to the hormonal, challenged teen, which is a description of every teen, no matter what they look like, by the way, even the most composed ones, and we try to have a conversation on their level, we're all going to fail. We need to be leaning it from a place of being really thoughtful and understanding of where they are at and how to interact with them in a way that's going to make them actually want to talk to us, right? How many times do we hear parents say, I can't get my teen to tell me anything, right? If I'm lucky, I get a word or two, or or a grunt. Now, it's true, there are those that are more talkative and less talkative, but my experience is that if you create a space for teens to talk, every teen will talk to you, even the teens who don't like talking and don't want to talk, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to be heard and listened to. But often what they've already decided about us, the greater adult world, and more so their own parents, is that their parents don't actually want to listen to them, right? They may ask questions, but they don't actually want to hear the answer because their experience is they don't usually listen, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
What happens is that we as adults, one of the first things, by the way, I tell parents who take my communication courses or, you know, do my trainings is like, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to go and I want you for the next week, pay attention. How much of your time are you talking to your teen and how much are you listening? Right? How much of the time are you giving a lecture? Are you telling them what to do? Are you saying things at them versus are you listening? And if, you know, and then come back to me and let's talk about it. What I want you to be striving for is a percentage of 80% listening and 20% talking.
Wow.
Most of the time, we're actually 80% talking and 20% listening.
Okay, so the topic for this series this week is motivating our kids to think about their future, right? So when we have a parent who's going to their teen and saying, okay, we need to start planning for your future, and this parent knows their teen really well and has really great suggestions, but still they're willing to say, okay, what do you want? What do you want to do? And they're just getting nothing from their teen. How does this communication work in regards to helping them plan for their future?
Well, the first thing that I would do is actually I would start completely differently.
Okay.
Because the assumption here of the adult is that your teen wants to talk right about their future right now, and that they're ready to talk about their future right now, and that it's time for them to talk about their future right now. Right? There are a lot of some assumptions in that first sentence of yours, and so I would actually start it differently and say, you know, just wanted to check in with you. How are things going? You know, what is on your plate right now? What are the things that you want to find out? What's occupying their time? What are they worried about? What are they concerned about? What are they happy about? Right? You want to find out where your teen is and what's on their mind. Because if they're dealing with a significant social issue right now, they're not thinking about their future, right? Or if they're really struggling in school, they're not thinking about their future. Or they may, right? I have a client that I work with who is a fantastic kid who is great and is in professional soccer, you know, towards like Olympic soccer, and, you know, transferred to a private school, and she's working really hard, and she has some eyesight challenges, and, you know, for anybody objectively, the kid's doing fantastic, right? She did really well this year. She's got one grade in chemistry where she ended up with a C. She almost was failing, but she got herself up to a C. I think that's fantastic. Everything else is A's and B's. Amazing, right? Both transferring to significant school. This kid has zero free time in her life. She's playing soccer on the weekends and a million times a week and trying to study and catch up, etc. She is very disturbed by this grade, right? Because she knows that she needs to get both good grades and be good at soccer if she wants to get into a college and get a scholarship, and that she needs that scholarship, right? And so her focus and where her focus and what is bothering her is in a very specific place, i.e. chemistry, or was, because now the school year is finally over. But from observing her from the outside, you wouldn't know that, right? And so you need to first find out where they're at and what's going on with them, and what's, you know, going well, what's not going well, etc. And then bring up the question, like I did, by the way, with another client of mine. I said, you know, who's a little bit older also. I said, so have you been thinking about it? Have you started thinking about what you want to do next? You know, is that something that's on your mind? And when I first asked the question, the answer was no. The answer was no. I'm good. And I'm not ready for that right now. I was like, okay. I said, so my question to her was, are your friends, right? Are your friends thinking about the future? Because she had actually changed a group of friends. She was walking around with a group of friends who were not really motivated, and suddenly she has a group of friends who are actually very motivated. And her friends are actually, yes, thinking about it, right? They're all very geared towards specific things already, but she just wasn't there. And part of what I found out by having these conversations with her was that she was actually avoiding thinking about the future. She was really stressed because her friends were so focused and so clear on what they wanted. And she was so confused and not clear on what she wanted that she was actually trying to avoid that conversation and thought. And so the answer was like, no, I'm not. Right. But had I not had the patience and been able to just give her the time to come around and get to that and tell me that, I could have either tried to push her to think about it, encourage her to start, thinking, do all kinds of things that what they would have done has closed her off more and made her even more stressed and more upset. And instead, what has happened is we've been able to take this slow process where not only is she now in a place where she's thinking, and this is a process that has happened over the last year, I would say, not only is she thinking about where she wants to go next, we started to have some very clear conversations about what that could look like. Right? She's a very artistic kid. She loves to sing. She's very good at it, but that's not where she wants to go professionally or in terms of college, right? She has some other ideas. And so we've tried to find ways to combine it. We played with it this summer. Amongst the many other things that she's doing, she's going to be volunteering in a place that's going to allow her to actually experiment with one of the ideas of the professions we've thought about. So she can kind of play around with it and see how she feels about it in a non-threatening way. But that requires a lot of patience, not being attached to the outcome. And I think this is one of the things I'd love for those listening to us to hear is don't be attached to the outcome, right? We all have ideas for our kids of what we want for them and what we expect of them. There's a young woman that I'm working with right now. She's 20 and her parents are very clear on have been very clear about what their expectations are from her, has to do with the background that she comes from. And it has put a tremendous amount of pressure on her. So much that it becomes debilitating to her. And even in her process now, as she's trying to figure it out, she keeps getting feedback from them of, no, but you have to go in this direction because you're going to make more money there. Or that's going to be better for you. That's not good enough because that is their expectation. And what I keep, trying to work with her on is how do you find something that's a bridge between their expectation, but also is going to make you happy. And you're going to come to something feeling like you're fulfilling what you are meant to do. There are a lot of ways to do that, not just one way or a few ways, which is sometimes the expectation, right? We see this sometimes, when I was living in New York, everybody's got to go to an Ivy League college. Well, an Ivy League college is not right for all kids. It's right for a very actually small percentage of kids. And when everybody feels pressured to go to one, even though it's not their real capabilities, we get things like abuse of medication, right? Because we have kids who are trying to work and fulfill, academic requirements that they're not capable of doing without enhancement. Right? And then they fall apart when they get to college, right? Or they just use even more. So there are a lot of consequences to trying to push your kids into a direction that is not the best direction for them. That being said, there are kids who need some extra pushing, right? And there are ways to do that, right? But it all starts from being able to listen and understand where they really are at right now. So that's where you want.
How do you tell then when a kid needs the little extra pushing and when your kid doesn't need it and you may be pushing them in the wrong direction? How do you discern the difference?
So, the first thing is if you are really listening 80% of the time, you will know the difference because you will have a sense of what's really going on in their lives and you'll be able to figure that out. That's number one. But that being said, what you want to take a look at is what is going on in the rest of their lives, right? If they are not they've gone into this pattern, I apologize for my dog, who all the toys around has decided to find an empty bottle.
Of course,
because it would be way too easy to pick something else. Here, Sunny, give me that. I'd like to introduce you to Sunny, but we're not going to do that. So you'll trust me that I have a very cute dog right next to me right now.
Hi, Sunny.
So you want to look at what's going on in the rest of their lives, So if you see a lot of avoidance, if you see a lot of time on the computer, on their phone, playing video games, doing things that are generally unproductive, okay, which by the way, you can be on your phone and on your computer and be extremely productive, right? I have a nephew that creates incredible videos and logos and all kinds of productive things on his phone. So we got to remember that there are ways to be using it and actually being super productive and creative and doing interesting things. But assuming again, if they are involved in things and being very, in general, passive and unproductive in their lives, then you need to be worried. Okay, but by the way, this is a great lesson, right? I took the bottle away, she took another one, and this is exactly teens, right? If you don't do the proper education, and I will admit I have not trained my dog properly, taking one away doesn't prevent them from having another one, right? One of the big issues, and teens tell me this all the time, it's very common now that groups of friends have a spare phone. So when their parents take away somebody's phone, they get the spare phone. So FYI, if you think that taking your kid's phone away is the solution, it is not. That's just a side note. Thank you, son, for the lesson. So, you know, you want to see what's going on in the other parts of their life. If your kid is very active, right, they're involved in productive things, right, good productive things, then you can lay back. You can really lay back and kind of let them go through their process, right? I'll give myself as an example. I, despite going to a very elite girls' school for high school, was not the best of students. I was busy. I was really busy in the Scouts. I was a counselor, and then I was in charge of all the 7th graders, and then I was in charge of 500 kids when I was in 12th grade. I was busy doing very productive, important stuff. School just was not the top of my priority. It was not the top of my priority, partially because the way I learn and the way the educational system works are not a great match. And so, you know, I was struggling in math, I was struggling in all kinds of other things. And so that's not where I wanted to put my space. I wanted to put my time and energy in places that I was being appreciated, where I felt like I was making a difference, where I was important. My parents were smart enough to say, we expect you to get good enough grades to be able to get into university. By the way, anyone. So what we do is we have in Israel the sets of tests that you take in order to get be able to qualify to apply even for university, right? So they didn't even ask for high grades. I just need to have the minimum. If I wanted to then work hard later and take them again to get higher grades to get into something specific, that was my problem. But I needed to be able to graduate high school. The fact that they took the pressure off, and part of it, I think, is because I was doing, and everywhere else in my life, I was very active and productive and busy. I was not sitting at home doing nothing, right? I was active and I was doing productive things. And what that allowed is it allowed me to develop at my pace. They always were checking in with me. They kept making sure that I took responsibility for myself. So for example, in parent-teacher conferences, my father, the teacher would, I remember this so vividly. The teacher came to my father. I never did homework in high school, ever. It's amazing that I have a master's degree. They would say, look at my father and say, your daughter isn't doing homework. And he would look at them and say, did I not do my homework? And they would look at him and they'd be like, no. And he'd say, so why are you talking to me? I graduated high school, thank God. If you have a problem with my daughter not doing her homework, talk to my daughter. Don't talk to me. It's not my problem, right? And that was his philosophy. My teachers were always in shock, but that was the truth, right? I had to deal with the uncomfortableness and the consequences of the actions that I chose to take, right? And so what that did is that then I had to face it and I had to make a decision. What was I going to do? And how was I going to deal with it? So I was learning responsibility. I was learning to deal with the consequences of my actions. I was being productive in other areas of my life and being successful. And thank God, everything has worked out. Clearly, I'm doing very well in life. And I even have advanced degrees. Because I was, right, again, looking at me, I was an active part of society, so to speak. If your child is withdrawing, your child is clearly struggling and having a lot of trouble, that's a different story, right? Or if they're choosing to be very active in things that are not productive or even dangerous or harmful, then that's a whole nother story, even more so, that you need to be concerned about. But we have this tendency today, especially in North America, to expect teenagers at this stage of life where they are just trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in to already know what they want to do for the rest of their lives. And that's unfair. And the pressure that we put on them is tremendous. And so for some kids, that works with their personality, it works with who they are. And for many kids, it doesn't. I'm a huge fan of postponing college for a year and going on a study program, going on a volunteer program. Colleges, by the way, love it. You are much more likely to get in when you go into these programs. I happen to have a brother who runs one of these programs, so I can see and I know what happens. And I can tell you from working with some, college admissions officers when I was living in New York and Columbia, et cetera, they love these kids because they're a year more mature, and they have time to figure things out. And so that's not, no matter where your kid is, it's actually a great thing to do. But remember that there are a lot of paths to go. It's not just one way. We don't graduate high school, go to college, move on. There are a lot of things that we can do. And we want to make sure that we open the possibility for our teens to find the path that is the right path for them. Not just the path that we hoped for and wanted for, not the path that we expect, but the path that is the right path for them. And if we don't listen to them, and if we don't encourage them to think for themselves and learn to take responsibility for themselves and learn to live with the consequences of their actions and learn to fail, and all these things that are critical at this age and stage of life, then it's going to be a lot more challenging later on.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Oh my gosh, I'm just taking it all in. So one of the first things that we can do is just remember that the measure of our education system may not be giving you really accurate information, right? Your child may or may not excel in that way. So that's the first thing to remember. The second is to look into where they are spending their time and their focus and determining if it is productive or harmful, things like that. And listen. You said listen, 80% listen, right?
Yep.
Be patient, give it some time, give them time. It seems so simple, yet it can be really stressful too for parents, right? Because I don't know, I remember when I was younger, always hearing, if you don't go to college right away, then you're never gonna go. But in my personal experience, I did, and it wasn't the right fit, and I left and took a few years off before I went back. And the experience I had going back older was so much more valuable to me. I was in a better place, I was in a better headspace. And in the end, we have so many years after high school to figure things out.
And we need to just be open to the fact that everybody's got the path that is the right path for them, and having them healthy and happy to the extent that we can be happy in this world, and that productive, etc., is a lot more important.
We buy into the have tos just as much as anybody else, right? And then we prescribe those onto our kids a lot of times.
I'd love to share my gift, but I feel like there's one more thing that I need to say.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Just another tip for the listening is, if you when you come to the point where you want to share, because there's always going to be a point where you want to share, my one biggest tip to you is that ask your teen, would you like to hear what I have to say, right? Or can I share with you right now what I think? Just ask for permission, because if they say no, then this isn't the right time to say what you're going to say, because they're not going to listen anyhow. If they say yes, which they will say most of the time, they are actually about 80% more likely to listen to what you're saying than if you didn't ask the question. Because our teens know how to tune us out. They do it really, really well. And by simply posing the question, you are shifting the dynamic and shifting their focus and attention to actually listening to what you have to say. So I just wanted to leave, everybody with that.
Thank you so much for sharing these insights with us. I really appreciate it. This is going to be so valuable to so many of the people watching today.